All right, it's time to talk about breath work, my absolute favorite. And maybe I've said that a couple of times, but this one truly is my favorite topic. When I was at Kokoro Yoga on the mat with Mark Devine, he asked us a very simple question the first day. Do you know how to breathe? And I thought to myself, well, of course I know how to breathe. I'm breathing right now, aren't I? And over the course of the next 2 weeks, I quickly realized that I did not know how to breathe. And I've actually uncovered the fact that to this day, I'm still correcting a dysfunctional breathing pattern. Meaning that I was breathing in my chest naturally rather than using my diaphragm. And I'm going to talk about all kinds of pieces when it comes to the mechanics and all the benefits of breath work. But I first want to just introduce what breath work is. And one of the things that I tend to notice is that people think that like breath work is some sort of experience that they've done one time. Oh, I've been to a weekend seminar, we did breath work. And or, it's this really intense Wim Hof like breathing where then you do cold exposure, and that's not for me. Well, breath work is any breathing exercise or technique. And it's really more about a moment by moment practice. Yes, we have a seated practice I'm going to teach you, but it's a moment by moment practice. It's something just being aware of your breath. Dan Brule, one of the absolute masters of breath, he has a wonderful book called Just Breathe. He talks about a breath practice is taking one conscious breath a day. When we look at the breath, it is the bridge to our mental toughness, to our emotional intelligence and resiliency, and to our physical performance. During breath work, what we're doing is we're intentionally changing our breath pattern to manipulate our state of mind, to control our state. And what we have to look at is that how each breath pattern has a corresponding emotional response. For example, how do you breathe when you're panicked, or you're afraid, or you're angry? Right? You probably breathe short and through the mouth and in the chest, like, right? And on the other side of that, how do you breathe when you're grateful and you're happy and you're calm and you're relaxed? You breathe a little bit lighter, a little slower, right? And to recognize that there is an instantaneous reaction to what's happening from our mind and our body and our breath, that they're interlinked, right? So becoming aware of your breath. And there's two different types of ways of looking at the breath. It's breath awareness. I recognize that my breath is disturbed. So what's going on in my environment? And it raises my level of awareness. So breath awareness and conscious breathing, meaning I'm taking control of my breath. By becoming aware and taking control of it, we're able to manage our stress. We're able to guide our attention or our focus and stay more focused on what the task at hand is, right? And we're able to change our state. Our state is our thoughts and our feelings. We're able to shift our state in any moment if we feel out of balance or we need to come back to the present moment to perform. So something to understand is the average person takes between 16 and 20 breaths per minute. And the optimal number of breaths per minute is 5.5. Right? You might hear 6, some people talk about that. So for somebody who's struggling maybe with an overactive mind or anxiety, right? It's a feedback loop. The faster you breathe, the more anxious you become. The more anxious you become, the faster you breathe. The more you think and you overanalyze and you overprocess, the shallower and faster your breath is. And the faster your breath is, the more it feeds back in that loop. And you can see how there's this vicious loop constantly creating, right? It's interesting. A dysfunctional breathing pattern is linked to anxiety. 80% of people who struggle with anxiety disorders have dysfunctional breathing patterns. So that's an interesting little kind of dot to connect. So which one is really the cause, right? Where does it start? Where does it originate from? Well, I know that by being aware of and taking control of our breath, we can do amazing things with our minds, with our emotions, and with our physical ability. So The other interesting piece, that our breathing pattern has shown to be the #1 predictor of long-term mortality in the general population. So basically, the better your breath pattern is, the more consistent your breath pattern is, the longer you live. So that's the motivation right there, right? This is why I'm so passionate about teaching the breath, and teaching it by breaking it all the way down of what's going on and starting with the mechanics and the physiology and our state. We'll get into more of those later in the breath section. I want to read to you a quote from Dan Brule, who's again the master of breath, and he talks about the breathing system in most people is not functioning at an optimal level. We need to heal it. We need to improve or restore our breathing capacity to correct any dysfunctional habits or patterns that interfere with free expression of our true nature and our full potential. Once our breathing is full and free, healthy and natural, once it is restored or raised to an optimal level, then it automatically becomes a therapeutic tool. The body and the breath can be used to heal the mind, and the mind and the breath can be used to heal the body. Breathwork can be used to heal attitudes, emotions, and behaviors. So breathwork becomes something that can be therapeutic, preventative, right, restorative. It's amazing what things that we can do with a very simple breath practice. And not only does breathing potentially help us with an overactive mind and calm our nerves and manage our stress and do all these other things, but it can help us with our physical performance as well. And I've gone through the Oxygen Advantage certification program because I wanted to fully understand what was going on when it comes to our performance and our breath. In my years of being a college football player, I was diagnosed as having exercise-induced asthma. Now that I'm able to look back on those years and recognize my dysfunctional breathing patterns, I never had exercise-induced asthma. I had a dysfunctional breathing pattern. And so it's fun for us to see that this correlation between our performance and our breath. I'm going to read to you something from Patrick McCowan from his book, Oxygen Advantage. If we breathe better, increasing the amount of carbon dioxide inside of our body, then we can deliver more oxygen to our muscles, our organs, including our heart and our brain, and thus heighten our physical capacity. So at some point when we get into this, when we talk about our CO2 tolerance and how we maximize that, it's the CO2 that delivers the oxygen to our tissues, to our brain. And so if we're over breathing or we're breathing through our mouth and we're dumping off CO2, then we're not getting the optimal amount of oxygen. It's not about over-oxygenating your breath by breathing in more to get more oxygen. That's dumping off CO2, the very thing that we need to fuel the tissues, the muscles, and our brain. So working on our breath, not only the capacity and the mechanics of it, but the threshold. So how we're able to manage our breath can improve mental clarity and performance, manage stress, and all of the above. So it's important to do a little bit of a self-assessment to know maybe do I have a dysfunctional breathing pattern? So do we wake up in the middle of the night quite often? Right? Do we wake up with a dry mouth? Do we find ourselves throughout the day yawning, sighing and often? If we do, then we very well may have a dysfunctional breathing pattern. Another sign is lower back pain and breathlessness when we're resting, or poor concentration, feelings of anxiousness or irritability, and snoring and insomnia, right? It can lead to sleep apnea and all kinds of other issues with our sleep as well. So sleep and breathing are very tightly interwoven. So I absolutely recommend that you hop over to that breath section in the bonus section and start to go through that. We're going to dive deep into the breath. It will lead into meditation work and visualization as well. And I am beyond excited to share all of this content with you. The breath is something that I've studied more than anything else. And the thing that I have found is that there's a lot of contradicting opinions out there. And there's a lot of information being thrown out to the world right now about the breath, but hardly anybody is breaking it all the way down to the mechanics and building people up from the ground up. That's what you're going to get here in this breath section. You're going to get all the foundational principles with it and a practice to build that up over time so we can improve our breathing patterns and we can get all the benefits that are unlocked to reach our full potential. I'll see you in the breath section.